Our login form is looking pretty great, but there's just one last little thing that I want to fix up inside of our code base. So at present, we've got our login screen state, and inside of here, we've got that method email field, where we produce a new text form field. The text form field has that validator function, which receives some given value. We inspect that value, and then we return an error message if the value doesn't conform to some given constraint. Now at present, our application has just one form inside of it. And so writing the validator directly inside of here, totally fine. However, I bet you could easily imagine that if we had a more complicated application, we might have many different forms. And maybe all these forms would be something like this login form. Maybe we would have a sign up form. Maybe we would have a forgot password form. Essentially a lot of different forms that would probably try to have a user enter in their email address. And so if we have an application with many different email inputs inside of it, we might want to try to reuse this validator function right here inside of many different inputs that we put together. So even though it's totally fine for the application we just put together to write the validator directly right here, I think that we should figure out a way to make this function a little bit more reusable to handle the case in which we might have other inputs that we want to validate. So to make this function right here a little bit more reusable, we're going to use a feature of Dart called Mixins. So let's talk about what a mixin is and how it's going to help us reuse this validator function. Okay, so on the left-hand side, we've got our login screen state class. And as you well know, we have methods tied to it like build, email field, password field, and submit button. You and I are going to make a second class inside of a different file, and we're going to call that validation mixin. So this is the name of the class right here. Then inside that class, we're going to add two methods, one called validate email and one called validate password. And as you might guess, those functions are going to be email, validate email right here. And the second function, this right here will be validate password. We're going to set this thing up as a mixin. The idea with the mixin is that we can link this mixin to another class, so I can essentially form a link between these two classes like so. When I set this link up, all the methods that are defined inside of validation mixin, you can imagine are copy-pasted from this class over to the target class. So we can kind of imagine that we are copy-pasting the validate email and validate password methods over to our login screen state. So we're going to define all of our validations inside of one single mixin, and then if we have many different form inputs inside of our application, we can just reuse this class again and again as a mixin to get these methods copy-pasted over. So if we later on had like a second screen of something like forgot password, where we would definitely want to have some email input over here as well, so a user could retrieve their password, we could form a link from validation mixin over to forgot password screen, and very similarly that would copy paste these validate email and validate password functions over to that other class as well. So mixins are a great way of reusing functions throughout a single application. Anytime you find yourself rewriting the same function over and over, great candidate for a mixin. So let's take a pause right here. We'll come back to the next section. We're going to start implementing this validation mixin.